Hello and welcome to Straight Shooting with Dan and Joseph. Tune into this podcast to get the latest news on competitive shooting events and to learn how to become a better shooter. Remember to subscribe to the podcast and be sure to recommend it to all of your shooting friends. Hello listeners, I'm Dan Kello along with Joseph Stacker here today, and today we've got a special guest, Blake Liles from 415 Training. Welcome you here, Blake, and we appreciate you coming out.
Thank you very much.
All right, so we'll get more into it a little bit, but tell us kind of what you do and what your shooting background.
Started shooting in 2009.
Okay.
Shot limited for a couple of years. Moved into open and kind of hung around in open for the rest of the quote-unquote shooting career. And the last 2 or 3 years, I've actually kind of learned to actually play the game and learned how to shoot it. So I'm starting to pass a little bit of that tenacity is a good word for it, onto newer shooters and shooters wanting to get a little bit better.
All right. Well, we appreciate you coming over today. Blake's going to sit with us through the entire podcast today, and then at the end we're going to have some training and tips that he does at 415 Training, and it's 415training.com.
Yes, that's correct, 415training.com.
And helping Joseph get started with the USPSA shooting. So in today's shows, we're going to have our updates from scores around the country. Joseph and Blake are going to give us a little update on Henry's Cup down in Rosenberg where they shot the USPSA match. And then we've got our straight shooting challenge where Joseph and I went out yesterday, shot an axe head with a 38 Super Comp, split the bullet, and popped a couple balloons. Then we're going to get into the betting of a rifle, why you bet a rifle, how you bet a rifle, and how that's going to benefit you to do that and make your rifle more accurate. And then we'll finish off the show with our segment Bleeding Off with Joseph, and he'll be spending his time with Blake Lyles from 415 Training. All right, so match updates from around the country. Our 50-50 is 22 bench rest. They call it 50-50 because they do their main matches at 50 yards and 50 meters. So they move them back a little bit, and that's why they call it 50-50. Kind of wintertime, don't have a lot of matches going on right now. Their next big one's going to be March 21 and 22 at Piney Hill Indoor Club in Luray, Virginia. They're going to have the Sporter Nationals and the Indoor 3-Gun Nationals. So they do some classifications. 3-gun for them, it's a little different than the 3-gun Blake's used to. 3-gun for them means you're going to shoot a Sporter rifle, a 10.5-pound gun, and an unlimited gun. And Sporter's 7.5 pounds, got a bunch of different rules, 6 power or 6.5 power scope magnification, got to be mag fed, but you don't usually use the mag. They still feed them one at a time, but very in 2-piece setup. And then 10.5 pound gun, pretty well you can do what you want, but it's got to be 10.5 pounds.
And you can't use a tuner on Sporter.
No, in this one you can't. This one,
okay.
Well, you're right. They don't use a Sporter. What they do is they've got a big dog knot on the end of the barrel, and they backbore the barrel, making the tuner built into the barrel.
I see.
And remember we got those R4s in from
Yeah,
Schilling?
yeah.
That right there. The end one, they'll backbore it, and essentially it's a tuner, but it's part of the barrel, and so that's within the rules there.
Little loophole.
Yeah, they kind of, what it is. They make the rules, try to restrict. Everybody tries to get around getting that nth degree better.
Gamers.
All right. On ARA News, February 22nd, they had the Arkansas State Tournament at Frog Level there in southern Arkansas. Jim Moorhead was third. Bill Drummond was second. Jerry Smith won that. Back up in Luray, Virginia State ARA there in Piney Hill. They had the ARA Virginia State match. Third place, Kenneth Richards. Second was Tom Wilkinson. And the first was Chuck Morrell. And then the next day, they just had their club tournament. And third place was Tom Wilkinson. Second was Chuck Morrell. And the winner was Kenneth Richards. So congratulations to those guys. Did have a few 2500s. In ARA, shoot 25 bulls, one shot at each. 100 points maximum on each one. So 2,500 is your maximum target. Maximum score. Last year we had just over 30,000 targets shot in competition, and I just saw the numbers just a while ago. I think we had 50 2,500s indoors and 26 outdoors, which is like major record. Before this year, we never had over 20.
A third of that.
15 or 20, but stuff's gotten better, and so, but still, you still look at it, 76 out of 30,000.
I was going to ask, is the equipment getting that much better, or are the shooters getting that much better?
It's really the same guys. I mean,
That's the big debate.
you can add the time. I mean, because another 2 or 3 years has gone by, so they probably are getting better. But it's not like they're gonna be like.
They're getting better. I mean, I think the equipment's getting better.
Yeah.
Ammo's getting better.
I was going to say ammo's probably a big part of that too.
Ammo's a big
Ammo
part.
and
Huge,
barrels.
and barrels are getting a lot better. Anyway, but it's been interesting to watch the scores climb and go from there. And the same too, the average score per target has drastically increased, and we'll try to get some. I'll try to get some information on that.
The ag and maybe the A-line also, it was the highest this past year, right, that it's ever been?
I would suspect that. I haven't looked at it to see, but it's definitely going up. So Jerry Smith actually had 2 that he shot at frog level there in Arkansas, and Bill Drummond had 1. And then new this year for ARA is our factory class, where we're trying to do an introductory factory class where factory rifles are what you use, and it's a little bit bigger target, but there's not a whole lot you can do to the gun so that Joe Q public can walk up with something and actually be somewhat competitive.
Like my Smith & Wesson 22.
It's it's basically like production.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be a lot like production in the USPSA realm of things,
where you can't buy your way into it with good equipment. So to be successful, you have to rely on your abilities, not the equipment.
And there's still a little bit of equipment. I mean, because you're going to have to find ammo and that, but not nearly like on the unlimited.
Anybody can find the ammo if they just
a little work.
Yeah.
And anyway, we had our first 2500s in that. Jeff Kite has one at Kettlefoot Gun Club on the 22nd, and that one's unofficial. On a 2500, they send it in to us, to the ARA main office. We certify it and go over that. But I've seen a picture of it. Looks good to me, but we'll should have that in here in the next few days. And then Joe Friedrich out at Open Grove in Oxnard, California, had 2 of them. So a lot of people recognize Joe. He's been a long-time shooter. Hadn't shot in a few years, but we're glad to see him back shooting again. And remember, too, that our ARA is doing a factory rival giveaway after each quarter. We have a Savage rifle with a Citron scope, and it's going to be matched up with 500 rounds of the Ely Precision ammunition. We're going to do a raffle for that after the end of every quarter. To get your name into that drawing, you just compete in a match. Every target you shoot in a factory match gets you 1 entry. So go out and shoot factory match, any ARA certified factory match, and you'll be put into that drawing. And we're going to do that first weekend in April after we get all the scores in for the first quarter as we finish up.
We have been getting some questions at somebody's club if they want to start having factory matches.
Yep.
They just contact us.
Yeah, it's just
at ARA.
Right. AmericanRimFire.com, or you can give us a call at 325-754-5771. And any ARA sanctioned club can have ARA factory matches. And if your club is not set up, give us a call. We'll certainly be glad to get you on board. Okay, upcoming next week, Thursdays, we're running monthly matches in San Angelo Gun Club on Thursday night matches. We're going to start that on the 12th. Frog Level on the 14th is having their club tournament there in South Arkansas. And then on the 28th and 29th, this will wrap up March, and it'll wrap up really the indoor season. Indoor season ends at the end of March. Chickenfoot Indoor Club in Cedartown, Georgia is going to have a double tournament weekend. Got the Georgia State one day and a club tournament the next day. So that'll be, or it may be vice versa. It may be the club, then the state. But anyway, double tournament there for that weekend. And a lot going on there. We're going to have all the big shooters from the indoor season going there to wrap up to make sure they keep their points up and finish off the national chase for the A-line and the Ag line. I also wanted to give a shout out to the Coyote Arms Shooting Center in Edinburgh. Have you ever been down there, Blake?
I've been there.
Man, they have a lot of matches. Mark Self's down there, runs a lot of the matches. They've got NRL 22. They got some precision rimfire. They got some USPSA. But down there in South Texas, check out CoyoteArmsShootingCenter.com. If you're in South Texas, they've got all kinds of different disciplines. In some NRL 22, another one to watch is go on Facebook for Hobble Creek Canyon NRL 22 series. Jim Cannon runs that. He's in our Ely sponsored shooters. Jim Cannon.
I just saw that pop up, and I thought it said Hobble Creek.
Yep, no, that's Hobble Creek there. Well, they have some of the biggest matches in the country, and their monthly match last on the 29th had 91 competitors in it for that NRL 22. Rick Baum was in 5th in open class. Stefan Leimer was 4th in open. Hunter Dean in 3rd for open. Nick Harris was 2nd in open, and then Dexter Thane with shooting base class won it. So they have 2 classes, base and open. Base is limited by MSRP of the gun in the scope, and as long as the gun in the scope stay under that MSRP, then you're into the base class. Now, Joseph and I are going to be heading out there March 28th, leading up to that.
It's like the 3rd week in March this month.
So March 28th, they're having the Ely Rocky Mountain NRL 22 regional match at North Springs Shooting Range in Price, Utah. And lots of prizes on that. Lots of people signed up for that. So if you're going to be in Utah, come out there and see us. I'll be there for that match. We'll be there earlier in the week doing some mobile testing. Joseph and I will both be out there doing it with the mobile test range. And then Joseph's going to load up. I'm going to stay there for the match. We'll have everything out there for sale there in Price, Utah. And Joseph's going to fly over to Florida to shoot the USPSA. That's Glock Area 6.
Yeah, the Area 6 Glock Championship.
Down there in Florida. So
that's in New Smyrna Beach, Florida.
New Smyrna. Yeah, I see Steve and Joseph are going to be out there. Got the hotel request is right on the beach, I think. That ought to be pretty nice. Lead Farm 41 in Lubbock has been having some NRL 22 matches. Their next match is March 15th. But their February results in the open class, 3rd place, Daryl Bachman, 2nd, Ryan Curry, and the winner, Bryce McKelvey, won that. In the base class, they had 3rd with Sean Hightower, 2nd was Kyle Terhune, and winner was Matt Benishek. And I'm sure I butchered those names, but those are the base class winners out at Lead Farm 41 in Lubbock. So if you got any other scores you want us to read off, be sure and email them to Joseph.s@Kello Shooting Sports, right?
Yep.
Or you can message us on the Facebook page or the Instagram. We'd be glad to include your competitions in our results. All right, USPSA side of things.
Mm-hmm. So last couple weeks we went to multiple matches. You heard us kind of talk about the Florida match and Frostproof. The very next week we went to Henry's Cup, which is in Rosenberg, Texas. It's a great match. It's very well put on. They have very good stages that are challenging.
This was a hard match.
For every class shooter, it's challenging. But it's not like, because I was talking about how I got frustrated in Florida. I wasn't as frustrated at this match, but you could recognize that the challenge was there. Your overall winners, JJ Ricazza, not a surprise that he won. He was also 1st in open class. Kim, is it Hwansik? I think it's Kwanzik. He got 2nd overall, and he's also shooting carry optics. So he was 2nd overall shooting minor. And
both of those guys are world-class shooters, though.
Yeah,
they really are.
That's pretty good. Dominic Coe was 3rd overall, and he was also 3rd in open class. Spencer Stein was 4th, and he was 2nd in open class. And then Blake Miguez was 5th overall, but he was 1st in limited.
Something interesting on that match, you had to go all the way. I didn't look at the total number of shooters, 250 shooters, give or take.
It was like 267, I think.
You had to go down to 42nd overall to find a person who did not have any mics.
Yep.
To find the first person who had no penalties.
Really?
42nd.
Good shooters.
I'm still trying to get my first match where I don't have any.
Well, and that's
it was a tough match.
I would have done a lot better if I hadn't shot so many misses. And there were multiple stages where I forgot targets completely. Like, didn't even see them, forgot they were there. They went out of my plan. They stopped existing. And then for PCC, Grady Steeran was 1st. Ethan Anacondo, which he's an awesome open shooter. He was in my class as well.
Is he sponsored by Bull? Okay, that's why I thought. I
But he
remember that
just
name.
he recently started doing PCC,
Yeah.
and he burns that down just like he burns.
He's a young
down.
fella, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
18 or something,
Yeah,
19,
something like
20.
that. He's
Yeah.
young.
And then Tony Wells was third, which we met Tony in Arizona.
Okay.
And is that you're talking about a personal trainer? Is that who you were looking at, or?
No. The guy. There's a couple of guys in Abilene that I'm looking at.
I was gonna say I know he talks to a lot of shooters about like health and fitness and stuff like that, and how to improve. So I was just
I'm
wondering
actually
if
going
that
to
was
go to a
him.
guy. They're going to make me sweat and hurt.
They'll do it. They'll do it. So how'd you finish up?
I think there was like, it was either 267 or 276 total. I was 167th. My percentage is what dropped way down though, because in Florida, I think it was like 55, 56%. Here it was 49. So less than 50% is not great.
Blake, will you explain that on the percentage thing? Because that's one thing that's kind of confusing to me starting off on how when they do percentage. Because he's at 55% of what the top guy was.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you can pretty much bet that the top guy has no misses.
And he didn't. He had 4 and a procedural. Three.
Oh,
Either
okay.
3. Yeah, you had to go down to 42nd to find the first shooter that had no penalties.
Okay.
42nd. Everyone above that had penalties.
Hmm.
It's a crazy hard match. The percentage points work. Let me think how this goes. So, on a stage, whoever has the highest hit factor gathers 100% of the points.
Okay.
So if there's 100 points on a stage, someone factors it regardless of what that number is, because that number, everybody's like, what's the best hit factor? Well, that changes on every single stage. So whatever the highest hit factor is gathers all the points for that stage. Whoever shoots percentage-wise below that gathers that percentage of points. So
Okay.
if you shot up stage and you won the high hit factor with 100 points, you'd get 100 points. If he shot it and he was 10% below you, he'd gather 90% of the points. That begins to dictate who places first to whatever on a stage. And then those points add up and then rank you first to whatever on the entire match.
Okay.
And then the percentages really don't matter so much from a scoring standpoint, but they start defining percentages if the match counts as a classifier.
Yep.
So if this would have counted as a classifier match, J.J. Racaza would have won 100%, so he'd have got a Grandmaster score on it. Not that it matters for him, he already is. He would have got 49%, which is B or C or something like that. So,
Okay.
But that depends to develop on him. If his percentage is up there, then he can gather a classifying score based on a major match, which is always a good thing.
And that's not terrible for me because I'm still unclassified.
Well, and J.J. Racaza kind of ruined our curve. I mean, he's such a good shooter. He kind of ruined the curve.
Yeah.
Right.
And there was a lot of good guys there. Jeff Emmerich was there. Luigi, the guy that we met in Florida, he's a carry optics guy. He's an extremely good shooter.
Kwanzaa Kim was second at Nats last year, right behind Max Michelle. Not far behind Max either.
Okay. All right, very good. How'd the match go for you, Blake?
You haven't heard?
I have, but
So,
saw video, I think.
yeah, it was a pretty cool video. It's a pretty good
He
washout.
posted the video. I saw it in live time.
It was, if you're going to go out in style. One of our stages, we started on stage 6, and on stage 3, you had kind of a big U-shaped path you had to take. My last position, I was going around a wall, and I don't know if I tripped over my own feet. I think I hit some sand and just lost traction in the sand, and I almost ate it pretty good.
I mean, almost. I would say that you did.
When I say almost, I mean I almost hurt myself. The wall
Right.
caught me, and the wall acted like a safety net. The wall just kind of went squish. Otherwise, it probably would have hurt. But in the process, I broke the 180, so I got to go have ice cream.
Very good. It's always impressive to me, honestly, that doing that, you still have the presence of mind for trigger control. And if you broke the 180, it was barely.
I never want to really one of those guys that whines about mistakes, because mistakes, like I told you earlier in the day, if you're not rubbing, you're not racing. Having said that, when the range master came up to do the official paperwork to DQ me, that was the only question I had: is where were the ROs to make this call? And they didn't say where they were. They just said 2 of us made the call. So I'm like, well, it's all I can do.
Right.
So
Right. Go on there.
click approve and move on.
Right. But still, you had the presence of mind, because how many people are gonna? I mean, most people, if they fall down with a gun in their hand, there ain't no telling where that gun's gonna end up. Let alone fire off a shot or something, you know what I mean?
What happened to him in particularly, like just the way that it happened, you could probably take 60% of either beginners or just less experienced shooters, and they're probably gonna shoot themselves. Like, it was.
Yeah.
It was awfully close to being a very bad day. It really was. That's what I've told somebody. I said I came around the corner, I felt my feet give out, and I'm like, I can save it. Oh, there's a wall.
Yep.
And it happened step.
Yeah.
It was pretty. But that's the only that. When I very, very, very first started shooting, we started shooting at the Abilene Indoor Gun Range. They had a little small club match in there, and one of the guys told me, said, because I had no clue. I mean, I was as green as you could possibly get into a sport.
I like me and Joseph.
Oh, no. It wasn't a question of how many if I was going to zero a stage or not. It's a question of how many stages was I going to zero. But he said, just always act like there's a string on the end of that muzzle connected to the back of the berm. So no matter where you go, that string's always pulling your gun that direction. So it's always kind of sticks in my head. And so that's the only thing I could think was, God, get that gun up, get that gun up,
Yeah.
Finger off the trigger just in case. It's kind of of course you're moving. That's one of our safety rules is when you move more than a couple of steps, that finger's got to get off that trigger anyway.
Right.
Which is part of the reason, so that if something happens, you stumble, boop, you don't shoot.
Because that's a natural. I mean, you're gonna tense up.
Natural. Just grabbing for something. Last fall, when we finished up down there at Rosenberg, one of the gentlemen in my group fell, but it was kind of more of a stumble and kind of sat down on his butt, but he kept it downrange and then was able to get back up and keep on going.
If you don't break any 90s or anything, you can get back up and keep shooting.
Well, yeah. Well, I've seen you just run around and just do a forward roll just for the heck of it.
That's you gotta.
John McClane.
That's right.
So, like, I've fallen before and haven't broke the one. I fell one time at Area 4 when it was help at Wichita Falls, and I came to a position and I tripped over one of the ground mounts for the wall.
Right.
And I mean, that's why I told people, I said 5 things hit the ground: both knees, both elbows, and my center mag pouch. And gun stayed down range, finger came off, no problem. Get back up, bleed a little bit, finish the course of fire as best you can.
Right. And what we're talking about for our bench rest or NRL 22 shooters is 180 is there's an imaginary 180 degrees when you start shooting, and you cannot take the muzzle for obvious safety port because there's all kinds of people standing back behind you.
It's the
same
same
back behind. It'd be like doing a loaded gun on the firing line and turning around to the back of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same principle.
It's left and right and up and down.
Yeah.
It's also the vertical counts because a lot of people come around a wall, they'll do the old cop thing like this, and that gets on the 180 as well.
It's
which a lot of the IPSC, Mark's always on us from Mark comes over from the UK. They don't like it to go up.
They don't like it to go over the berm.
Yeah.
They don't like that muzzle to go over the berm. They get twitchy.
Because that's one of my, I've just always been taught. Muzzle up.
For us, it's either straight down or straight up.
Yeah.
And I've had to kind of relearn that to where, and it's not any different than it would be at like a bench rest match.
Right.
It's just not verbalized the way that it is because, it's kind of like common sense. These are all guys that have shot for a long time. So if you have all your benches set up, if downrange is this, then, it's basically just nothing behind me.
Right. Okay.
Well, we're shooting real bullets,
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we're not shooting paintball. We're not shooting airsoft.
Yeah.
That's right. Yep, and they will do damage.
Mark actually told me when I was talking to him about that crash, he said there's a guy that came down from Canada. This was several years ago, I assume. And he said he fell and discharged the gun, and he said he got the ultimate and permanent DQ. And so apparently he died on the scene, I suppose.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
It can go south fast.
They are firearms.
They are.
All right, very good. So what do you got coming up this month? I think you were heading somewhere this weekend, aren't you?
I'm going to Austin this weekend. It's one of their just local kind of monthly matches. It's at the Austin Gun Club.
Saturday?
Saturday morning.
Okay.
I think it's called like a Top Gun something, and it kind of has a
Is
theme.
it the Austin Rifle Club, right? Or Rifle and Pistol,
yes.
ARPC.
Which
Rifle
is
and Pistol
actually,
Club.
it's called that, but it's in Manor.
Yeah.
Um,
Good deal. You're going there. Where are you going this month, Blake?
Well, we have our match there. If it didn't get rained out, we got a lot of rain today. Big Country Tactical host Big Country USPSA first Saturdays. I'm the match director for that, and that's where I'm going.
All right, so that's in Abilene.
That's in Abilene. BC3G on practice score if anybody's interested in that.
9 o'clock Saturday.
10 a.m. I believe.
10 a.m.
About 160 rounds.
Right.
This one has a lot of movement in it. It's gonna be a fun match.
Now, are you running that match? Are you the match director?
I am the match director for that.
Okay, very good.
So I get to in my little sick, twisted mind, draw up the stages and put them on the ground and hope they look like they do when I.
Do you add many classifiers into
We
those?
have one classifier.
Okay.
This particular one is Roscoe Rattle. Craig, who's the manager for the ranch, he doesn't want the classifier to be. Some of our classifiers have very low round counts, 6 rounds down to even 6 rounds. I don't know if there's any less than that, but he doesn't want them to be so low that the classifier is not a substantial part of match points.
Right.
So he wants the percentage of that to be a little bit higher. So generally speaking, I'll try to get 16, 18 rounds or better for the classifier, which usually means strong hand, weak hand, and multiple strings of fire. Roscoe Rattle, I think, is 18 rounds, but he wants it to be a substantial part of the match so somebody just doesn't not worry about shooting the classifier well for classification standpoints and then knowing it's not enough points to really affect the overall in the match.
To go towards the actual match.
So he wants it to be a substantial part of the match. So.
All right, so that's BC3G, Abilene, Texas. If you're in the area, go to that match there. All right, any other on the USPSA? That was about the only major match, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Into this month we have. Well, no, I'm going to Arkansas. Okay, Missouri.
Somewhere up north there.
Somewhere up north. Ozark Classic. I'm going up there. Yeah.
That'll work. That'll be nice. That'll be nice up in there.
I bet we get rain.
Yeah.
It's going to happen this time of the year, I think.
All right, very good. So that wraps up our match updates. All right, moving along to the straight shooting challenge. So this episode, Joseph and I decided we were going to use 38 Super Comp and shoot an axe to split the bullet and bust 2 balloons. And so we're getting everything set up. I'll mark off. I'm thinking this is going to be not too bad. So I did. Here's 10 yards. Here's 15 yards. Here's 20 yards. Well, we never got past.
We never moved past 10
I was going to
yards.
say 20 yards with a splitting an 1/8 inch target's pretty skinny.
Yeah.
With an open gun.
That's right.
With a non-magnified optic.
Yeah, that MOA is like
yeah,
as dim as it would go, and it's still covering up the whole thing.
So we lined up and did it. It took us a few tries just to get it. First, we'd do it in the we had the axe head up there, and I had it zip tied, and it would slap to the side and whatnot. And so Joseph's shooting it the whole time. So we finally got it stabilized where it wouldn't turn, and got ready to do everything. And I'm going to throw a protest here because Joseph, I don't know how many practice shots. And so Joseph did it in 2 shots, right?
Yeah, but I mean that comes
after the 30 before, but
you have to make sure that it's possible before you can do
we were
it.
making sure it's I mean, I'd seen videos of it done, but we just had to get everything set up.
And I didn't hit both of them every time. I mean, I usually
it would glance off to one side. We kept missing to the right, which I don't know if that was just trigger pull. We were just naturally just barely pulling it to the right every time.
Thing was angled.
Well, and even a good trigger pull on a 2011 is still little less than 2 pounds. I mean, still quite a bit of trigger pull when you're trying to.
Yeah.
That's a lot of trigger pull when you're trying to shoot something that small.
Yeah. But we had fun with it. Look on the YouTube channel there. You've already got it up, right?
It'll go up today.
It'll go up today. Okay. All right. Leaked out a few things there, I think, on, what is it, TikTok?
Yeah, that's a new, well, it's not new, but I just now started doing it.
All right.
It's just a little fast way to edit.
Dawn's on that and was on that. But anyway, Joseph won this one. I will give him to that. He did it in 2. I had 4 shots. We were out of balloons.
Yeah, we ran out of balloons.
So I'd already lost some. Just said forget it, and I shot both.
You popped one balloon twice. Well, 3 times technically.
Yeah.
But then on the third one, you just smoked
I
both
just
of them.
double tapped it.
Because we were out of balloons.
Got it going. So anyway, we're looking for challenges. Try to come up with something to do each time. Please get on Facebook. Show us some things you're doing. Shooting flies, shooting lifesavers, whatever it is. Aspirin, shooting through the center of a CD or
Yeah,
a DVD.
I wanted to do that. Set
We
up
may
like
give that a try next time. But give us your suggestions
a
on.
DVD and shoot through the hole in the middle of it.
Don't do that with a super comp.
No,
Not if it's a movie you want to keep.
not with
Yes.
a super comp. It'll probably be like an old burn CD
Old
There you
Burns.
go.
from 2001.
All right, well, tune into our YouTube channel and check out when we were shooting the axe and popping 2 balloons. All right, moving on to our precision shots brought to you by Kello Shooting Sports, your one-stop shop for competition shooting needs. And we're talking about bedding. We're going to do a quick overview so we can get on with Blake from 415 Training. But on bedding and why we do it, why you should bed your rifle to a stock. And essentially bedding is the proper way to attach the barreled action to the stock. The stock going to be fiberglass or wood, laminated wood, or, I mean, we've even seen them out there in the bench rest game. Some of the guys have a solid aluminum stock. They've milled CNC, machined out and whatnot. But bedding is going to increase the accuracy. For one, it's going to help by relieving stress on the action. The rifle's action is rarely going to sit flush in the stock when stock comes. They're just, especially on a wood stock and everything, it's hard to get everything just perfect and perfectly in line and straight and everything. So when you tighten the action screws, I've got an action here if you're on our YouTube channel, Triton action built by Whole Shot Arms there. We're going to have an action screw in the front and an action screw in the rear. So when you attach that down to the stock and you tighten those screws, you're essentially pulling this down. Well,
Which
if
is
you
gonna
have
do
this, right, if you
it's
have
gonna
something
bow
high
it.
in the center, you're going to bow that action on there. Even though this is stainless steel and it's tight, I've actually seen actions that a custom action, a Hall custom action was one that you really got to watch for it, that the tolerances on the bolt are so close that if that bedding is not perfect on that thing, you can feel the bolt drag. And I've even seen it where they torqued it down to where
or
you
it
could
won't
you
even
could
open.
yeah, you couldn't even move the bolt because it had torqued it down. So if you're tightening these 2 screws on the front and back and there's a high spot in the middle, it's going to bow it. It's going to flex away from the port. The port, you cut that hole in it, so that created a weak point. Bedding is the attempt to make that to where that's not an issue. You're going to have this thing fully supported so that that is not going to be a problem as long as the bedding and the surface between the if the surface of the bedding is perfectly clean. You can't, I've seen them too where it's a perfectly good bedding job, they had taken it out and put it back in and got some gunpowder down in there on it, and that is a couple 3-4 thousandths thick that will make a difference. You can see it. Also, when you close the bolt on a gun, that's putting tension on it and is essentially trying to elongate the action. Well, if it's not properly supported, again, it's going to flex away from that port because when you cut that hole in it, you create a weak point. I've even seen one guy that made an action that didn't have a port. It was solid steel, and you took the bolt out the back and you put the round on the end of the bolt, and then you slid the whole thing in and shot.
That's
and he,
pain.
right. I mean, he was trying to
Yeah.
eliminate this problem. Not very user friendly, but did get rid of the problem. So, all right. So how are we going to connect the barreled action to the stock in a way that's stable and going to be stress free? Most of the time we're going to do it, or not most of the time, all the time, the way we would do it here at our shop, you're going to have aluminum pillars. And we're going to have a piece of aluminum that's going to come down here. Action screw is going to go through it to the action, and you're going to tighten down so that when you're tightening down, you're tightening the action to the aluminum pillar. And then those pillars are going to be glued into the stock. That way, because if you're pulling down against wood and don't have any kind of pillars, so that wood's going to crunch, and the wood's going to crunch different in the front than it is in the back. It's just nature. Or even fiberglass. Fiberglass is going to be the same way. So I've got a fiberglass stock here. If you're on our YouTube channel, you can see how we've got this fully inletted. and got epoxy in there to where we make a perfect match of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut out all of this in the action area on the stock, cut out for the trigger, cut out the bolt notch, cut the holes to put the pillars in. We're going to glue the pillars in there first, get those in there on the action. They're going to be in the action to where we can get them straight, put them down in there and glue them in. And then you're going to take that action, and you need some kind of release agent to cover that action. We use Johnson's paste wax like you use on a wood floor. There's all kinds of stuff out there that you can use, and you're going to coat this. Anything you don't want the bedding compound to stick to, you better get it coated with that, because that we use epoxy, and that epoxy is going to stick. So we coat it with it, and then take a towel, paper towel, and wipe it off with the paper towel to where you're going to look at it. You're not going to think anything's on there, but there is. There's still a very small layer so that this thing will release. And then we're going to use DevCon steel epoxy, and we're going to put that all in the area of the stock that's going to be in contact with the action. And then in the action, we're going to put in all the little holes, we're going to put some kind of putty, or some kind of putty. What am I thinking of? Clay type,
Yeah.
that you're going to put in there to just keep it from going into the holes and whatnot. Because then when we're going to slide it down in there, put the 2 action screws in and tighten those down to where we get it positioned properly. And you're going to want to squish that epoxy out all the way around so that you've got full coverage and you're not leaving any kind of voids. Now we use DevCon steel putty epoxy. We like it. A bunch of people have used it for many, many years. Not any problems with it changing after years and shrinking or anything. It's really strong. Some people use Acro glass. There's other things out there. It's just the DevCon steel putty is what we've used, along with the 2 pillars. And then the pillars are going to be epoxied in there as well. But you can see, if you're on our YouTube channel, as after we've done it, now you've got a perfect match up, because that molded that out there to where it's perfectly matched onto that action. And as long as that's clean, then when we tighten down those action screws, it's going to be stress-free. It's not going to put anything in a bind, and it's going to do a good bond that's going to stay there, and it's not going to move. Now for rimfire, the way we do them, we don't put in a recoil lug. What we'll do is, again, if you can see on our YouTube video, we've got it recessed down in there a little bit so that the rear of the action, the tang, is going to hit against the stock. And we just use that as the recoil lug. In these 22 rimfires, there's not hardly any recoil. I've seen a bunch that didn't even have that, and just the action screws are going to hold it. If you're doing a center fire, then you need a recoil lug. You got a lot more recoil. And the recoil lug on most typical center fires is going to go between the action and the barrel. And essentially when that gun fires and recoils, the majority of that force is going to go through the recoil lug to the stock or to the bedding area, so that it's not on the action screws. And the action screws would be the only other thing that would hold it. Now, the reason we don't mess with it on a rimfire, it's just another surface you got to have right in the bedding process. You only want that contact on the to the stock on the back side, so that when it recoils, that's the only thing that's pushing. You got to make sure that you're clear on the bottoms and the sides, because again, you're going to create a potential point that's going to bind and create stress in that action and lead to accuracy problems. And so that's why we leave it off. I get a lot of people to look at it, and first time they'll say, well, you ain't even got a recoil lug on this thing. Yeah, well, no, that's by intention. I mean, we've done that, took them off. You'll see very few custom 22 bench rest guns out there that will have a recoil lug. Stiller, in his action and in some of the other ones, they cut this little slot here in the middle. So some people will bed in a recoil lug or put a piece of steel or aluminum down in the bedding and act as a recoil lug there. When we do ours, we fill that with putty and just leave it. Some people will do what they call a belly float, to where you'll have contact for about a ½ inch or an inch on each side of the action screw in that area. And then this area right here is going to have epoxy, but what they'll do is they'll put a couple layers of tape on the action, so that when you after that epoxy sets up and you pull the action out, now you've got a gap. And what they're doing is they just want to make sure they don't have a high point in the middle. and that works perfectly fine. A lot of people ask us about torque setting on the action screws. My contention is, if it's bedded right, it doesn't really matter. As long as it's tight enough to hold it, which I consider to be on a rimfire 20 inch-pounds. As long as you got 20 inch-pounds on there, I haven't seen those come loose. We do 40 inch-pounds. It's just because the guy who taught me how to do it, that's what he did, and so that's what we've always done and have never had any issues, so that's what we do. I've seen people do 50 and 60 inch-pounds. I don't know why you'd want to go any tighter than that, because essentially you just need something that's going to hold it in there now. It's properly bedded just so that it doesn't come loose.
Yeah. That's what I do 40 in the tunnel.
Yep.
Unless
they specify.
It needs to be less, because some of them, because they're not bedded obviously into our fixtures, so some of them can't handle 40, and so then I'll back it off until sometimes it's 35, sometimes it's 30, sometimes it's 20, just whatever, as much as the rifle allows me to do without
up to 40
changing the way that it shoots. So I'll do that.
So just to kind of recap, we use DevCon steel putty along with aluminum pillars. We put those in there so that we can attach the barreled action to the stock in a way that is stress-free to the action. If the action is under stress, you're not going to be as accurate and you're going to have more problems. And again, even with a good bedding, if you take that gun out and put it back, make sure everything's clean. You don't get any unburnt powder or dirt or anything falls in there, because then that's going to create a point that touches and going to create stress on that action, and it's not going to shoot. And it does make a difference. It does make a difference. So if yours is not bedded, find a gunsmith there, get that thing bedded properly. Or this is something that a lot of people like to do on their own. It's a little bit messy. Just make sure you clean everything up and make sure you got everything taped off so that you don't get that epoxy on the stock or somewhere that you don't want it, because that stuff does stick, and it sticks good. But anyway, any questions on that, email us. You can email us at contactus@killoshootingsports.com. We'll be happy to talk to you and work your way through that. All right, moving on to our long-anticipated bleeding off with Joseph. We're going to talk with Blake Liles from 415 Training today and get an overview on how to get trained up properly for USPSA competitions.
Blake knows what that means. What does bleeding off mean?
When you are shooting targets moving out of your position. I guess is probably the best way to phrase that.
He asked me, I think on our first episode, how to define that, because he's like, what are we going to call it? I was like, bleeding off. And,
I lost audio.
No, you're good.
Oh, there it goes.
I muted me because I took a drink there. No, I didn't mute me. I muted the wrong one.
Did you mute me?
Yeah, you're number one. I'm sorry, my bad.
We decided to call it bleeding off, or I decided to call it that.
Good term.
So you said you started in 2009 when I was a junior in high school?
I started late. I started shooting, I guess it's been about 10 years now, and or something like that, 10 or 11 years, 9, whatever that adds up to.
What made you start, like, how do you, because you were, I think you were like a chef or a restaurateur or whatever you were doing.
Some version of that.
What did you do before?
I was a chef.
Yeah. Chef?
A chef for,
where at?
Oh, God, all from Santa Fe to Tyler, everywhere in between.
Okay.
Last few years, in the Metroplex, I was chef of a country club called Heritage Ranch, which is up right in the split between McKinney and Allen, a little town called Fairview. Super good club, super good food and beverage program. Somehow I decided I got a little, I tell people I got hit in the head with a blunt object, and I decided to open my own restaurant. And so I opened my own restaurant for a little while, and I started, when did I start? I don't remember when I started cooking. 98, I think.
Okay.
98, 96, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Decided to open my own restaurant and opened it in downtown Plano, and guests, I would say guest service wise, it was really good restaurant. Super, but my rent was outrageous, and financially it's a disaster. Made it about 6 months, and then a little movement over here, and a little bit. My dad always called me and my ex-wife gypsies because we moved around so much, because that's just kind of what you kind of do in that business. Ended up in Abilene, which brings us to USPSA. I decided to go get myself a little pistol, so I went to Academy and I got a Taurus 24/7 Pro 9mm.
All right.
And I was at the indoor gun range, plinking away at cardboard because I knew nothing better to do. And one of the guys there says, "Hey, Thursday afternoons, Thursday when we close at 7 o'clock, we have a little USPSA match, a holster, a couple of mag pouches, and I don't know, 120 rounds or something like that." And I'm like, okay, that'll be fun. And I literally drove past 3 or 4 or 5 Thursdays in a row until I got the nerve to actually go in there and shoot, because I had I didn't know if it's going to be a bunch of drunk rednecks. I didn't know if it was going to be a bunch of guys in shirts like this and that were just, pro. I had no clue what to expect. I just nothing. Didn't know anything. Finally went in there and shot it, and I was like, oh yeah, this is good. We like this. I'm horrible at it, but this is good.
So that would have been you would have shot that one production.
I believe I shot limited.
Oh, okay.
Limited minor.
How did that work out?
At the time, I thought it was great, but again, we get back to I didn't know any better. The thing is, when I started shooting, I knew so little. The score was almost irrelevant to me because I was just kind of having fun. I was actually shooting because it was fun, I mean, I would just go up there and I'd shoot targets. It'd be just like, and just no clue about aiming, no clue about trigger press, no clue about movement. So usually it didn't work out very well. Usually I was substantially further toward the bottom.
Well, reason I ask is because from an outside standpoint, looking in at starting USPSA or starting to compete in a shooting sports competition setting, production is the most cost-effective. Kind of like an entry-level thing.
It is, and that's kind of how production's kind of developed for production in limited 10 for the guys that can't have big mags.
Right.
But it kind of works out from an economic standpoint. That production, you can get a Glock 19 for what, $450 or something like that. 4 or 5 mags for.
But in a skill-based setting, it's going to be extremely. It's more difficult.
It is
to do well with production or even carry optics if you're a new shooter than like limited or even limited 10 or open.
Carry optics would be a really good one, I think, to get into because so like me and a buddy of mine have always discussed, shooting iron sights is technically a harder thing to do than shooting a dot. Now, shooting a dot, there are certain challenges for just the fact you have a dot, because everyone you're shooting against has a dot as well.
Right.
And so if they've shot 5 matches and you've shot 1, just inherently they're going to be a little bit better than you are. Just because, but you only have one thing to watch out for. You just have that one little dot to put on a target and press the trigger twice. Whereas iron sights, you've got those silly bumpy things you got to line up and keep lined up, not just once but twice as they move around.
You're to me it's almost backwards, because like when I started, we just like jumped into open. I shot one match that was carry optics, and that was with the Glock 34, and it had a shield sight red dot on it, and it was okay. I mean, probably a lot better than if I had shot at production or iron sights. And then we just jumped straight into open with both feet.
Yeah.
And to me, that's more on a skill-based setting. You can get away with a lot more shooting with a dot and even open, because
you can absolutely.
Yeah, everybody jokes that those guns shoot themselves or whatever you want to say about that. You do still have to shoot it, but it's night and day difference between shooting production.
Yeah.
So
again, you don't have to manage your sights. You don't have to manage your recoil as much.
So it's almost flipped upside down, that production is entry level and open is like the last thing. It's like open is easier to get into. It's more expensive, but
and that's probably the defining difference. Is really is open or carry optics. Either one is from just shooting is easier to shoot.
Right.
Production is easier to get into just from a financial standpoint. Because you get a whole everything for under $1,000.
Yep.
Whereas you're not even touching an open gun for $1,000.
But you have to have a lot of, maybe not experience, you have to understand what you're doing when you're shooting, because if you don't, it's going to get exposed immediately, whether your trigger pull is off, if your grip is off, if your sight alignment's off, your draw, everything is going. You've got 10 things right there that are
Well,
going.
that's what I tell my students. Just in that first 2 shots, most shooters are probably around a 1.5 for their first shot on an average target. And inside of that 1.5 seconds, how many things really happen to get that gun out of the holster, in your hand, get the trigger on it, line up your sights, good clean trigger press, and hit what you're aiming at. There's, literally 10 or 12 things happening inside of a second and a half. It's
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so
It's
you
challenging.
shot one match production.
Well, I shot for about 2 years limited.
Okay. Oh,
Rough
yeah,
numbers.
yeah. You said
I shot
limited.
the Taurus, and then I got into a XDM, and then I finally ended up with an Edge, and I shot that for a little while. And I said I'll never shoot open because opens. I said it's obnoxious loud, and the guns never run because that's all I can remember is guys always racking rounds out of their open guns. Yeah, hitting the head with a blunt object for some reason. I moved into open, and yeah, I like open.
Yeah.
Open's kind of my home. I'm toying with carry optics for a couple of matches just to take a little step back from open, but open's my home. I made Master, if I remember correctly, Master in 2 years, GM in 1. And so I've got a lot of guys around me that are always concerned about moving up, and I wish they'd listen when I say, don't move up so fast. Because when I made GM, my first local match I went to, I was getting my butt kicked by A's and M's. But as a GM, how's this work? There's so many things about this game that you just don't know until you really invest. So that's what I did for a long time. I'd invest in my stuff, in a better holster and a better mag and a better gun, and that's going to get me where, I thought I could buy my way into it, as you said earlier. And you really can't. You really have to put this money into yourself as much because there's so much to actually the sport from I don't say the gaming side of it, but from the shooting side of it. Beyond just a gun up in your face pulling a trigger.
Yeah. That's the easiest part is the physical shooting.
Yeah, one target, 2 rounds. That's easy.
That's the easiest part of the whole thing.
Just like the name of this episode's bleeding off.
Yeah.
That in itself is an extremely.
It's a learned.
It's not hard, but it's hard to do under speed, and it's hard to do when somebody puts that little magic thing in your ear and goes beep, and now what was I supposed to do
You
again?
forget everything that you had planned to do.
Yeah, we used to joke about that. We call that the delete button, because you got your stage play, and you go up there and you're like, okay, we're good. Beep.
What was I gonna do?
Yeah.
Where am I?
Yeah.
Yeah, I always tell everybody about the equipment because we get that a lot with ARA and our unlimited 22 bench rest that you buy your way in. And you kind of do to a certain point, but I always tell them, if you took me up to Indianapolis and put me in Mario Andretti's car, Mario Andretti's going to beat me every single time. Now, I got to have this. If I want to compete, I got to have an equivalent car.
Yep.
But there's still a lot of driving to do.
There's skill in anything just like in your bench rest. There's probably I don't know anything about bench rest other than the idea is to shoot the same hole.
Right.
It's very
And slowly.
You could compare it to open, like
The unlimited.
your top 10% would be the 10% regardless if they all had the same equipment or not.
Yeah.
Because you could probably give all 10 guys, like you could split one rifle between all of them.
Yeah.
And it would be a toss-up.
Yeah.
Who won?
Yeah. Well, that's when I moved to SV, and I started shooting SV pistols, and somebody asked me, did you do that because Christian Saylor did? And I'm like, I don't care what that man shoots, because he could pick up rocks and throw them.
Well, it's probably not going to matter what
Yeah, he could throw rock. Well, he shot another gun for a while, and he's still in a contender, and that gun didn't ever run. So he could throw rocks and beat the majority of us.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what gun he's got in his hand, kind of like Max Michel or JJ. I mean, JJ was shooting a Beretta open gun, for heaven's sakes.
Mm.
And that's a unicorn right now. There's not a Beretta open gun, and he was shooting. He made us all look dumb.
Still wiped everybody.
Yeah. Those guys, they just have a talent set that most of us, regardless of how hard we work, just won't. Just like we couldn't go drive and race around the track with Mario Andretti, no matter how many hours we put on a track.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, I was talking to Trevor Cotter about that, because he, I mean, as good as he is, he still noticed that there was a gap, and it could be the same for anyone who's technically a GM. you're still, just because you're a GM doesn't mean you're at the level of Christian Seiler or
I've
JJ
said for a while
Ricalzo,
that there should be a GM Pro division, and
Yeah.
the thing I really love, the two things I love about this sport, I'll say that, is if you do your job and do your work, you see your percentages grow every match. Because when I started shooting, I'd always be 35%, 40% in a club match where there's, and then I'd see it kind of creep up. So if you put the work into it, you can become competitive within a box, and that box depends on how hard you want to work, depends on how big that box is. The other thing I love about that sport is I've got friends that are golfers. They're never going to get to play around a golf with Tiger or one of those guys. Never, ever, 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 ever. I've shot with Max. I've shot with JJ. I've had Max's class. I've had Max classes with JJ.
Yep.
That's the thing I do love about this sport is that those guys are so accessible. Having said that, even for a GM to compete directly against those guys is tough because they do that every day as a job.
Mm-hmm.
I've always kind of said there should be a pro division, but that would also kind of ruin the sport. It'd kind of skew it a little bit. It'd be kind of taking them out of the pocket, and now they're separated like the Tiger Woods are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that it's always hard because there is a skill gap there, and I think that's what like Trevor's trying to do now is trying to identify what you can work on to close that. And some, I mean, to me, some of that is just like natural talent.
Absolutely, 100%.
Just natural ability.
Yep, 100%.
Because most of those guys, like, not everybody can run around a course like JJ Ricalzo because he could go do like a CrossFit.
Yeah, he's so physically
the next day and do really well at that also.
Yeah, he's so physically fit. He does things that most of us
can't do.
Cannot do. Yeah,
just physically
cannot. Yeah,
can't do it.
But then again, Max Michel, he's still physically a fit dude, but he
shoots a gun like he was born with it in his hand,
Yeah, pretty much.
Like that would be his natural ability, and I'm not saying that he doesn't work at it, like
if he didn't work at it, he'd still be in the top 90% of anything he ever shot. If he just said, you know what, I'm just going to shoot a club match now and then I'll show up at nationals, he'd still finish in the top 90%.
Yeah,
just because he's good.
And I think it's that way with
most of those top guys.
With Luigi, because like as good as he is, you could tell sometimes he just doesn't really care about how he does.
I haven't shot with him, so
he's pretty. I mean, he's super laid back.
I know he's a talented shooter.
He doesn't take it super serious. I mean, you can tell he just probably cares about other things more.
Having fun.
Because the whole time we were there, even JJ, he was like, "Dude, if you took this serious, like you'd be like one of the best guys." And he's like, "Whatever."
Yeah. He may be taking it serious his own way,
Yeah, and I mean, if I could be that good, even without like investing my whole life in it, that would be cool. But I don't have that.
Yeah. It's Max Michel always says, shooting fast is easy, shooting accurate is easy. Doing both at the same time or not.
So within because you said about 2 years between when you started and then when you made master and GM, what did you work on, or what did you identify?
So I really didn't. I thought just shooting was the answer. I never went with a plan. I never went with a clue. I just kind of go out there and set up a couple of targets and.
So just time, basically. You just invested a lot of time.
I invested a lot of time and a lot of rounds, but I don't know the quality of those rounds I invested. I don't really remember what I used to do. I really haven't started having a process or a plan as far as for practice session until last 2 years, 3 years. And that's when I started saying, I'm going to go out there today, I'm going to work on this. Until yesterday, I got to practice a little bit before it got too muddy, and I was practicing on a target to my far left, stepping into a box and making that hard transition to that target, which is kind of hard for a right-handed shooter, making that transition all the way back around like that to get that, because your body's moving in opposite directions of where your hands should be going, and then plus you're making that transition. And I was also practicing my carry-out gun. So
there was a stage in Rosenberg that was like that, where it was an angled wall. There's a target way over here that you had to lean, and for for a righty, it was really hard to make that angle.
Which one was that?
It was on the left side, so it was either 9 or 10.
Looking down the range, like where the parking lot is on the left side.
Yep.
So we started on 6.
No. So
looking the other direction.
Yeah.
Looking with the parking lot behind you. I shot all those, so I can't remember. I don't remember that offhand. I know, like stage 12, 11. I don't know. I'm drawing a blank.
it was either 10, 11, or 12. Because the first one on the other side was 1.
Yeah, 12 had the one where you had the port. There's a great big kind of long runway.
Yep.
11 seems like 11 was the one that had
The barrels.
2 barrels and then some targets.
I think
in
it
the
was
back.
12 then. Because after you ran that long,
Oh, I know what you're saying. Yeah. Well,
at the very end, it would have been the last target.
Yeah. That hard lean around it back. Yeah. But that's just a lean. That just, you got to get your feet right when you're going into a position like that and just kind of settle up and not try to win the match on that one position. Just try not to. So every stage can lose you a match, regardless of round count. But none of them are big enough to make a difference as far as winning it. If you do this one thing just right, you're going to win the whole match just because of that. But they'll sure tank you a stage. Sure tank a match on it.
So that's what you were working on, or not that?
Well, I was working on just kind of stepping into position and making a hard transition to my left. And then making a hard transition to hard steel on the right. So, But I usually try to go with some sort of a plan. I usually don't go down there and just randomly start shooting.
Right.
Standing in a box, drawing. Now, a lot of times I'll do like a single piece of steel and a single piece of paper. I call them onesie-twosies, just to work on a draw stroke and just work on a trigger press. But usually I'll try to incorporate a little something more into that, i.e. Stepping into a box, making a turn, stepping into a box into a port, or stepping into a position, going to a port with the little hard we always shoot those little hard transitions through a port.
So you got to put the work in, but it's better to put smart work in.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's
to take advantage of that time. You're going to have that time and that work in there. You might as well do it smart, so that instead of gaining 100, you gain 110.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, if there's not a plan to it, you're just plinking at tin cans. If you don't have a plan, you might as well just have tin cans down there shooting tin cans and call it for a day.
And is that why? Because during the 2 classes that I took with you, I don't know how many times you said it was be methodical. Do you think that's because that's something that you weren't doing initially as a new shooter? Like, so you're to help not shortcut, but to alleviate some of the time and round counts that, like me as a new shooter, this is something that you didn't do when you started, so you're trying to help me avoid that.
Maybe. I don't know if I've really thought about it that specifically, but I mean, I will say that the classes, not to really beat the classes up now, let me back that up one step. Newer shooters, I would say, probably generally have 1 or 2 mistakes they make, or a combination of both. Either they just don't aim, especially both shots. You heard me say aim both shots. They either don't aim both shots, because you got to have 2 holes in the paper, and ideally they should be closer together toward the center of it, or they just have no clue how to move. So when they move into a position, like my thing used to be, I was notorious about running into a position and putting the brakes on as I was stopping in position, and I would almost always fall out of the position. Step out of the fault lines, have to regain myself, step back in, get back on target. 2 seconds.
So that's the 90-10.
That's the 90-10.
Yeah.
Shh, give away my secrets. That's the 90-10. But being able to move effectively, and it doesn't have to be super fast. It just has to be efficient.
Yep.
So you're saying basically for a new shooter like myself, that's probably what, and I would totally agree with you. So make sure we're aiming on both shots, because I tend to do that. I'll aim that first one, and then I'm just pop.
Well,
I'm pulling it as fast as I can.
Think about our sport. One of the largest ranges we have, one of the biggest matches we have, is just north of us in Wichita Falls, called Double Tap Ranch. Well, that name right there, Double Tap, that indicates 2 shots. But usually a double tap is 2
very quick
gun pointed in the right direction shots, not necessarily 2 aim shots. And our game is very accuracy based. They say they put points first in our equation, points divided by time. They say they put points first for a reason, because they could have done time, square root of this, and made some cool formula. But no, they put just points divided by time. Call it happy. So points matter.
Yep.
whether you're shooting major or not, points matter. Because if you're shooting major, the guy next to you is shooting major too. So you can't give up points to him just because you think, oh, I'm shooting major. It's okay.
Yeah.
And then the movement part, moving, because honestly, that was one that was a real eye opener to me. Because I thought, okay, you're just moving from here to here and then here to here. Well, I'm not very athletic anymore, but I mean, at one point in my life, I was fairly athletic.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I can move that and do that.
Going
What's the
from
big deal? But
A to B.
but now that I've watched and started paying attention to some of the Christian Sailor and JJ and those guys, and in watching you too, I can see how, and watching them get ready, Anthony Bruno, I watched quite a bit, and how they're counting the steps and knowing, all right, I'm doing 3 steps here, 4 steps here, you push off here, you don't do, and all these little nuances that cut a half a second here, a tenth here, adds up.
Absolutely.
And it makes a huge difference.
So people that, newer shooters come into it and they think that they can physically shoot fast enough, but there's so many more things than just those 2 rounds. Like I've got a buddy of mine that he can shoot 13 splits. A split is
Your time between
the time
shots.
between 2 shots. 13 splits, a really fast, call it a double tap, really fast double tap. But there's so many other places you can make up a lot larger chunks of time than just that 7,000th over me.
Right.
Because I'm running a 20 split,
Right.
Yeah. And for me, the movement was probably, would you say that was my biggest issue?
Mm-hmm.
Because
as best I remember, it seemed very reserved.
yeah, because in day-to-day life,
Well, I tell you, reserved, I think, is a good way to put it, because in my mind, as a new guy and with my training in firearms and background, I'm like, I'm running with a gun. I mean, that's like, first thing Mama ever taught you, don't run with scissors or whatever. You're running with a gun. To me, that's
so you don't want to go balls to the wall
Right.
you're in a track meet or something.
Well, you do and you don't. I mean, it kind of depends on where you're competing too. So like me, at the level I'm at, I have to get there
right. Well,
as quickly as I can.
I'm saying that like in my mind, this is not something that I would naturally do.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Yeah.
But having said that, that 90-10
you do need
rule,
to do that.
yeah, you do need to do that. You got to get there quick because you got to get the guy you're shooting against, whether he does or you can't control him.
Yep.
But if you can get there quicker and you're ready to shoot sooner,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to gain some time on him.
And I still struggle with that because not all the time, but most of the time I'm one of the youngest guys in my squad.
I'm one of the oldest.
And I'm still getting smoked, like you take the overall stage time, it's probably either the same or he beat me. And he's like, why aren't you faster than me? I'm like, well, mentally, because
like I said, there's a lot. There's a lot. So, which classifier? You shot nationals, right?
Yep.
That one.
Well,
you shot nationals this
No.
year?
No.
No, you
No.
shot area. That's right. I'm trying to think. There's a classifier out right now where there's 3 targets on one side, 3 targets on the other side, and there's a wall in the center. Shooting areas back here. We just shot it just this last weekend too. I've shot it 3 or 4 times in a month and a half. And just something as simple as that. You're talking 12 rounds, and almost all the targets you can see from one position, but you have to move to see them all. There's just so many things that happen in just that, and it's just a straight shooting area. There's no curves, there's no round, there's no, there's a lot of things that happen in that just to be able to start shooting that and move across. I shot 2 mics on it last time I shot it.
mm-hmm.
2 mics last 2 times I've shot it, actually.
yeah, and it seems like it's a lot of not back and forth, but there's never something to not work on.
Yeah.
And that may be something that's it may be a reoccurring problem or something that you notice because, like, just as a general rule, it seems like if you're probably over a B class, if you're getting like 80, 90, 100% stages, then that should tell you that you need to try and go faster because your hits are there. And so now you need to work on getting those same hits or pretty close at a faster pace.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would take from that.
Yeah.
But once you start doing that, because that's kind of what I tried to do this last match, is because the way that the stages were set up, you're like, oh, I'm gonna blow through this, like the ones where it had the little cuts in the barrel.
Uh-huh.
I was like, I'm just gonna smoke through this, and I would watch my dot as it went by, and just bam, 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 bam. Shot it super fast. Had like 3 mics and a no shoot on it.
On that one, that the stage 7.
Yeah. And the targets were like from me to him. They're super close. And so mentally, I'm like, I don't even have to aim, it's right there. Well, yeah, I got 3 mics and a no shoot on it. And the no shoot was this big.
Yeah.
And right in the center of it. Just because mentally, I had already told myself, I don't have to aim. Yes, you do.
Yeah,
and
you
so
do.
I wasn't as focused on the movements, but I also wasn't focused on the hits that I needed.
And really, truly, that stage, as much as anything, was about 2 things. It was about really quick movement in and out of those, smooth, efficient movement in and out of those boxes, and aiming, because that's a race trap. That's a speed trap, is what I call that.
Yeah.
When you got a wide open target, then you got a little partial. It's hard for most people to shoot this really. It's hard for them to shoot them appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things we talk about is cadence. How quickly should I shoot at a given target? And that wide open target should be as fast as you can pull the trigger and still aim, get 2 A's.
But on a covered.
Then on a partial, you kind of got to slow that down. But most people can't go fast, slow, fast, slow, fast, slow. They'll go fast, fast, or they'll go slow, slow. Just a lot of people aren't able to go pop, 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 pop. That's something I struggle with even. That's one of the things I was working on yesterday is I had 2 partials just like that, trying to get that cadence appropriate.
Mm-hmm. And that's something that I've been trying to work on also, because it's something that the top guys do really well.
Christian Saylor's just ridiculous at throttle control.
Like, I don't know. I think it was the day after you were at the Infinity class. He actually posted a video from it, and it's like it sounds like a drummer.
It's dumb
because it's like far target, close target, far close, same thing, and it's like bop, 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 bop,
Yeah.
bop, like it's like there is a change in speed, but like listening to it, there's no gaps between them. It's literally just like bang, 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 bang. Like it sounds like he's shooting the
whereas
same target.
a lot of not Christian Saylor shooters would go
Yeah.
pop, pop,
Space.
pop, pop,
Yep.
pop, 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 pop. There's that transition between targets. Transition is a big thing where we try to gain speed. Transition is going from one target to the next target, whether it's paper to paper, paper to steel, steel to paper, whatever.
Yeah.
And that gap between those two is where I probably I don't make up my time running from A to B. I'm not there, but I make up my time going from target A to target B.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that you had told me in the first class is even if they're at different distances, it should still sound like you're shooting at the same target. Like the space between them.
A lot of times it should echo your ability to shoot the 2 shots.
Yep.
Your splits. Your splits and your transition should be similar. So if it's a really hard target, your splits are going to go bang, bang.
Mm-hmm.
And if that same target, even at distance, just because you have they're not super close together, your transition should be similar to bang, 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 not bang, 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 bang.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I struggle with, because I can shoot really fast. I just have to aim. And so I think that goes into, like, not every shooter is the same because we all have different things that we're just naturally better at.
Mm-hmm.
Mine is my accuracy is just because I've shot so long that I know how to shoot. So now I just need to make sure I'm aiming. And that with that dot, because sometimes you get a flash and you got to find it or whatever. So that's something that I work on that, he may not need to work on. Or another new shooter that
Always work
on it.
that hasn't been shooting, for a long time or doesn't have a lot of
I mean, if you think about it this way,
experience.
Aiming is just free.
Mm-hmm.
To just aim. It doesn't really cost you anything more to aim. You still got to shoot the target 2 times. What does it take to pull that dot from right here to a low Charlie or a Delta and just give it that fraction of a second to get back up into close to an A? Aiming, especially working on it, aiming's free.
Yep.
So that's one of the fundamentals you would say then that everybody should work on. I mean,
always.
Always.
It's points divided by time. Points first.
Points first. Yep.
The thing about our sport though is the penalties are so
Detrimental.
big. My mom, whenever she used to coach basketball, and whenever we started shooting, I'd tell her about this. I'd say, okay, so you throw the basketball up there and you go into the hoop, you get 2 points, right? She'd say, right. I'd say, so what if you threw the basketball up there and you missed and you got -4 points? And she went, oh, that's how our sport is.
Yeah.
Every time we get a mic, we get at the maximum point value for the target, which is 10 points.
Mm-hmm. And that's something that I know that I need to work on. Because before, or recently, even if I saw it, like if I dropped a delta or might have even missed completely, I wouldn't take that makeup shot and I have to get myself away from this. I'm like, well, I'm not gonna win anyway, so.
But if you make that up and you get more points, you're further up.
Right.
And
that's something that I have to start doing more, because probably the only number that I watch is that percentage. Because I'm trying to get, just to me, to track is 50 or better. Mm-hmm. And if it's more than that, if it's 60, 62, whatever, then great. But I want to get more than 50%.
But that changes depending on who you're shooting against, right?
Correct.
Yeah, but at most of the matches, you're going to have at least one GM or a really good guy that's an A class, like, that you're shooting with. They may not need to be...
Because if you shot against me, your percentage would be real high.
Yeah, but...
and you may be the worst match you ever shot. I mean...
But at most places...
It is relative, but
yeah.
it's a good gauge. Really, what I'd kind of look at really is not necessarily percentage per se, because, I mean, it's just where you place.
Right.
And you see kind of a trend. Okay, so generally I've been down in the bottom 2/3. The last 3 or 4 matches I've been about the half. Okay, I'm improving. I'm doing something right. What am I doing right? And that's when video is always a good thing. So you can watch it about 8,900 times.
Right.
And the last 3 times you watch it, you can actually watch and pay attention to footwork and reloads. Like, I know one of my big pet peeves for me personally is I'll reload way down low, and I know I'm supposed to be up here, and I try to work on that. And I watch my reloads, and I'm like, hey, well, that was a pretty good one. And then the next stage is way down here in my gut.
Yeah, and that's something that Luigi told me, because I let him film me for majority of the stages that I shot, and it was like, just watching it was way different than the matches that I've shot, like with guys that I knew or that were kind of around the same skill level. I'm like, dude, this is like a professional video. Like, it's like a videographer took this. And he's like, I don't care about the paper. He's like, I don't care about the targets. He's like, the whole point of a video is to see what you're doing. Because you can see, he's like, you can look at the scores and see what you're hitting.
Yeah.
Like, you can't tell how you're moving from the scores or anything that they put on practice score.
Mm-mm.
You need to see how you're moving, because like on the 3 quick barrel stages, I had a foot fault. And he was like, that's exactly what this is for. He's like, you can see where it was, because he's like, did you feel it? I said, no, I didn't feel it. Felt like I was still in the box. He's like, well,
clearly.
Now you can see it. Like, oh, okay. So targets don't matter in video.
Nope, they don't. And it's hard not to watch them for entertainment value. Like I said, I'll watch them a bunch of times.
I mean, they're cool to post, but like you'll still post. Like, you posted, I think I went through your page. You had like 3 where you DQ'd.
Yeah.
And we get to see why and whatever. One, there was like a rickety swing bridge, and coming off of it you had like stumbled or something.
That's when I blew my Achilles.
Oh.
Yeah, that was about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, something like that. Yeah.
But
So I've got one of the guys that we shoot. Well, do you know Taylor O'Howson?
Yeah.
He's
a really good shooter.
Super good shooter. He's really good at posting the good things he does and the not good things he does. On the back of my shirt it says win or learn.
Yeah.
And so, and I think that's a great example of the fact, okay, so I know a draw. I know I can do a draw real good. But it's always good to show a draw. Like, I started drawing with a carry-op gun out of a regular holster now, and I've almost dropped it a couple of times the other day because I'm pulling up like it is a race holster.
Yeah.
And I've actually got to come
no
all
retention.
the way. Yeah, I've got to come all the way out of that holster now to let the muzzle clear, and
Yeah.
and so yeah, you show the good things and the bad things, and again, you learn from them, hopefully.
So between the time that you had a lot of time invested and you'd shot a good number of matches, between when you either decided or it was brought up to become an instructor, how far between those would you say? Like 10 years or?
Oh, yeah, about. Because I just started instructing this past summer.
Okay.
Trevor Cotter beat me up about it, and he was my first student.
Yeah, he told me that.
He
He's like, I'm the whole reason he's.
He beat me up about it until until I just couldn't say no anymore.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to. I didn't really want the hassle of it, but.
What does that look like? Like, because I think some people have like a misinterpretation of it because of social media, because like somebody who's like 18 or 19 who like just has a good physique can put on there that they're like a fitness coach or whatever. It's not really, I would assume it's not the same way for a firearms instructor, but sometimes it is, because it's still kind of a trendy thing to like, well, I can shoot well, so now I feel like I can tell other people how to shoot well. But there's got to be some sort of class or like certification or something that you have to go through, or is it just time spent?
It's really, at least for me, my thought process is I really don't feel like, even though I made GM, when I first made GM, I thought, okay, maybe I can buy my little land out there and I can coach a little bit, but I still wasn't doing any good at bigger matches, what matter,
Yep.
you know. And then I started getting a little bit more competitive at the bigger levels. And Trevor started beating me up about it, and so that's when I finally said, okay, so I've got a little bit of pedigree behind me now. Now I'm not a world-class dude, but I'm not charging world-class money, but
Right.
I've got a little pedigree behind me, so I can feel reasonably competent that I can translate some of this information back. I taught when I was back being a chef. I taught culinary for a little while, and being a chef, you teach every day anyway. So I had really a good instructional background, although it wasn't in print as being an instructor, if that makes sense.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a good basis on how to teach. And then I felt like I had the pedigree to teach it, so I sat down over after when Trevor finally convinced me of it, and a lot of early mornings and a lot of coffee and just flicking through PowerPoint trying to decide what are really important things that newer shooters or more experienced shooters need to know to shoot this silly game.
Mm-hmm.
A whole lot of coffee.
Just putting it down on paper and coming up with a plan.
Well, I kind of, I watched a lot of videos. I looked at back. I always try to save, in one of my folders, I always have major match stages. So I go back and look at those major match stages, and I see kind of common themes. Oh, there's always leans, there's always ports, there's always big movement. There's always a transition. Always. There's almost always some of those 4 or 5 things in a stage, no matter how big or how small the stage is. And so those are some of the key things. I thought, well, we need to know how to do that properly.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of backtrack up on my stuff and some of the training that I've had from Max and JJ and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And how do I translate that down? How do I dumb that down to where I can tell people efficiently how to do it? I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I've noticed that a lot of the, not information, but what people refer, like 90-10, that's not, like, you wouldn't be able to track down the first person, whoever.
So I know
Like,
who I got
patented
it from.
that.
I got that from JJ Racaza. So I don't want to say that's a coin thing for me,
Right.
but he got it from someone that was like nothing to do with shooting sports.
Mhm.
It was more of I think it was like an Olympic coach or someone that he got it from, and I'm sure somebody probably got it from them. But the thought process is a good thought process. 90% of what we do doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is the last 10%.
The 10%. So, and that's like what you were saying. If you have a movement and you're going from this target and you have to run 10, 15 steps, whatever, you're right as far as how you're perceiving that as, well, I just have to get from A to B. For the most part, yes. But your last 4 steps maybe are going to be crucial in how you set up your position to shoot that last target.
Which gets back to one of the worst things I used to do was I would come in, if we talk about a 90-10 roll from here to here, and I would come in 100% to there,
Yep.
and you can't stop.
Yeah.
You run out of a position. And I just gave my nearest competitor 2 or 3 seconds just because I was dumb and couldn't put the brakes on.
So what type of classes do you offer now?
So I offer, other than we can always do a custom class, I offer 3 levels, level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1 is, I call it fundamentals, although it's not basics. You need to be somewhat competent within a USPSA shooter to go through that class and not just be completely mind blown. Level 2 level 1 is how to eat an elephant one bite at a time. So level 1 is very much a drill is pretty specific on the process. I mean, if we're doing transitions, we're pretty much just working transitions. Level 2, we start compounding things. So you might work on transitions and then into a merger or entries and exits during transitions, things like that. So level 2 just gets same basic foundations, but you start compounding those. And then I start making you really think about what you're doing so that you're aware of what you're doing when you're going from A to B. Because unfortunately, a lot of people just think I'm at A, now what? Oh, now I'm at B, now what? So I'm trying to make you aware of it.
When I did, because I've done level 1 and level 2 now. Level 1 showed me not only what I should be working on, but also how to drill that without being like at a class or at a full range. Like I can do this in my living room.
I've got a little small book that comes with it. That's again, it's this tiny little 12 pages or something like that of simple little things you can do in your living room, on the range. Like I told him when he's walking out in the warehouse, when he makes a turn going down one of your little hallways, step it like you're going down a position. You know, there's no reason not to. Then you start building those things into memory, into muscle memory.
And then
Are you doing that?
I do that. Like I did it the other day.
We've been laughing at him like, what in the world is he doing?
When I was at the
what he's doing is getting better.
When I was at the grocery store, and
he's at the grocery.
I wouldn't recommend air gunning at Allsup's, but
I wasn't air gunning, but my feet, because I just noticed I was like there was like hot sauce or whatever, and as I was walking, it was like bobbing. So I was like, I'm gonna make it to where it's all just like it doesn't move, like it just looks like I'm driving down the road. And so that's what I did. And so people watching me at the grocery store were just like. Probably just saw my feet like rolling, but nothing was bobbing. Like
everybody's moving to a different aisle.
Like,
all of a sudden, ain't nobody around.
I was like, "Yeah, I'm walking so
phones
smooth."
are coming out.
Another one of them meth heads.
Yeah, it's like I've got no bounce in my step walking through this grocery store.
But you know those little things like that, you start beating them up, and pretty soon they're just natural. And then when you go to a stage, then you're thinking about you
ain't got to think about that.
A and B, and then this is just natural, and then A and B again, or whatever. There's less things for you to program into, which is one of the things I was going to say about earlier. That's another thing I see a lot of newer shooters doing really, really bad is their stage walkthrough.
Yeah, and it's we do that, or we did that
really, really bad
because
the stage walkthrough is probably 80% of this game. 40%.
Well, can you tell what are we doing wrong?
So what we're doing wrong. Because I know what he's gonna say. when we walk up, say there's 5 targets, we go, okay, so That's not
easy.
That's not how we're gonna shoot it. We're not gonna shoot it in like bang bang, bang bang. Like be realistic.
There's that word again, methodical.
Yeah. You have to be realistic on how you're gonna shoot it because that also gets your mind in the correct cadence. Like. If you get up there and you can actually shoot it faster.
Like if you go to a position and there's a low target and a far target, when you're doing your walkthrough, in your brain you should be thinking, bop, bop, bop,
bang,
bop.
Bang, yeah.
You should be thinking that cadence. You're starting to program in all those little bitty details that add up.
Instead of
target.
When we're staging it, if it's a 30-second stage, and we turn that into a 4-second walkthrough, and we're like, okay, run over here, bang, 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 run over here. I'm gonna get there in 3 seconds when it's like 20 steps, It's going to take you longer than that.
One of my friends down the Metroplex, Bobby Ivester, really becoming a pretty good shooter. He was 7th, I think, at Henry or something like that, somewhere around that number.
I think he was 11th. Because
11th.
He did well.
I almost took this to top 10 just because I knew that you had worked with him or done some stuff with him, and he was 11th.
Yeah, he's making it. He's up my pipe.
Yeah.
If he's watching this, you're up my pipe, Bobby. Him and I do very different walkthroughs, but I think I haven't shot with him in a while, so I haven't seen his walkthrough in a while. But I know for a while his walkthrough was very fast-paced and very little discipline on target. So in other words, he'd come up to a target, and I know he can do a 13 split. And he'd go bop, 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 and he'd do the same thing on steel. And as a rule of thumb, I would beat him on steel. And that's usually where I'd get my points on him, is just because he didn't have that patience, I think, that patience in his walkthrough to give that steel the respect it deserves. So he'd miss steel. And he also tends to do things. I do my walkthroughs I very rarely run anything at speed. That's just me. He does run things at speed. It works for him, but he still is giving the walkthrough the respect it deserves as a part of that puzzle,
And it's a big, I'm seeing more and more how big of a puzzle it actually is, because I can see what I'm needing to do or how I need to merge or transition. I can see all that now, but one thing that I still don't understand is the time that it takes. And so I don't have the ability or the experience right now to say that you run a stage one way and then you do it backwards. I don't have the ability to look at that and say, this is going to take me 11 seconds. If I do this or if I change that, that drops it down to 9. I don't understand how long each movement takes, so I can't recognize if I change something or if I do it differently, if I'm actually benefiting or if it's going to take the same amount of time. Which you're able to do that because you understand how long the movements take, or cutting stuff out. Which I think a lot of because you hear most of those guys say, like JJ, he made a big story about it because he was watching our squad, and Luigi had a reshoot. Well, it was on a big long stage, and I think it was like he had 23 seconds on his first one. But the reshoot was something about the barrel, like they couldn't tell if he had hit it or if it had gone through the barrel and hit the target. There wasn't any way to know because the bullet was kind of a wonky shape, and so they just gave him a reshoot. Well, his first one was a 23 seconds, and that was with like 2 Charlies and like a Delta, I think. So JJ came over there. He was like, hey man, why don't you do this or change this? Well, so he did, reluctantly, he did what JJ told him to, because it wasn't what he would naturally do. Like, he had to change some of his movements around. But he did it, and his next run was a 21. And that was like JJ. He's like, I just cut 3 seconds off of his run, or whatever. And he's like, how did it feel? And he's like, didn't feel good. It didn't feel good, but I did it anyway. And so that was the whole thing. But I don't have that ability, like, to see.
It just comes with experience, I would think.
Right.
Well,
Seeing stages and running different
and
directions.
one of the so, 2 notes on that. One of the things that we really haven't talked about on this sport is, we work on our movement, we work on our transitions, but one of the things that you just can't work on, it just comes with time, is just maturity in the game. Knowing what your strengths are, knowing what you can do, knowing what you can't do. And that's just rounds down range and shooting lots and lots of matches.
Yep.
I don't ever really look at something and say that I think this should take me X time, and if I do this, it should take me that much longer or less. But I will look at things and say anything that I can do 2 things at once, I'm going to try to do. Or if I can eliminate a position, for instance, the one I DQ'd on. We started on the left side, ran up to the port, shot the 2 low targets through the port, and then the zebra that was through the next port, I shot from that position. I shot on just a little creep up. And my thought process, and I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing because I didn't get to see a time on it, so we don't really have a reference. My thought process on that was then all I had to do is get to that far corner, shoot the 2 through the port. Then I had all that time getting up to those last 2 low targets to do a reload. Again, I don't know if that's better or worse. As a rule of thumb, I charge targets, so as a rule of thumb, that's going against what I normally do. But I don't really ever. I don't ever look at something. I know a lot of guys that I shoot with will say, okay, so we'll count this out. So that's 6 steps. I know I can move X far in 6 steps in this much time. I don't get quite that specific. Usually my game plan is just shoot it where it makes sense in my head, and shoot it to where I'm trying to do a couple of things at one time. Let the chips fall. Don't make mistakes. That's my biggest thing. Is I usually don't make mistakes. Usually.
Yeah, and that's so leaving Henry's Cup. My biggest takeaway from that is mics matter, which I knew they did already, but it wasn't. I wasn't understanding how big of a part that plays in your overall standings, because like it was just normal, and it's probably because I was a new shooter anyway. But I would usually get a few mics per match, whether it was 3 or 4, whatever. There was usually some in there. And it wasn't like I was just missing completely. They were all in hardcover or in like tuxedo targets or whatever. But I know at Henry's I had a bunch of mics. And whether that, like, I think I had 3 failure to engage because I just forgot that the target was there, or lost them during the whatever when I was shooting. Or
well, in all fairness, that match was just asking for failure to shoot at, or whatever they call it now.
I had 3 of them.
That's a hard match.
Right.
But like, I always reference this back to Double Tap Championship last year. I was second overall. John Browning beat me by 3 or 4 or 5 points, something like that. And I had 1 mic no shoot, which is 20 points.
So that's it right there.
That's it. That's
got beat by 1 shot, essentially.
Essentially, yep.
Yeah.
One shot changed me from winning the whole match to not winning the whole match. 1 round, 1 single .355 bullet.
Okay, well, as we start to kind of wrap this one up, to kind of recap on what you said, for new shooters, the thing I'm kind of picking up today is aim on both.
Yep.
And the next one was, just lost it.
Your movement.
Yes.
Give your walkthrough some respect.
Yeah.
Walk through some respect and start paying attention to the movements.
Yep.
And I think in my point here, and maybe for a lot of beginners, it gets to be overwhelming with all the different things, but just for right now, just start paying attention and start watching what other people do when they leave a box and how they come into a box.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter whether they're a good shooter or bad shooter, because if it's a bad shooter, you'll see them come in and shuffle step as they're getting in position, or step out of the box and step back in the box. If it's a good shooter, you'll see them come in and then plant that foot, and then they'll have the gun up and ready to shoot. So it doesn't matter whether it's a good shooter or bad shooter, as long as you know whether they're like upper or lower level shooting.
Just what I've gone through in the class and watching like pro guys or sponsored guys, whatever, shoot, I can tell who's been doing this a while and,
who's been practicing
and who hasn't, just by their feet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like Blake Miguez was in my squad, and that's all I would watch.
I wish he'd moved to Texas. We could use a guy with his brains in Texas.
When he would run the stage, all I would watch is his feet, and he would do basically the same things that you'd shown me how to do. When you're coming into a box, that foot plants on the outside of the box. You step in, and then you just bring it in, and he would do all that. And I'm like, okay, so that's what I need to do. It wouldn't be as smooth or fast as that, but I would still do it.
Well, and another thing, I think younger shooters also, they think that it is all about speed. And if you watch the big Christian Sailor as fast as anybody, or Lester Murdoch's as fast as anybody, you really never see the screeching tires and flying dirt. You just see things quickly, but nice and smooth, both from the exit and from the entrance standpoint. You take out all that herky-jerky stuff.
Right.
And a lot of, I think, younger shooters think, well, if I get there faster, that's better, right? Well, it is. But you have to control that stop is the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So new shooters, start paying attention to that. I know that's going to be a big help to me. Aim on both. I always like to aim the first one and just blast the second one.
Yeah, then you're just guessing.
That's right. And start paying attention to the movements, watching everybody else's movement, and learn more. 415 training is where you can get with Blake. He'd be happy to work with you, I know. We're going to twist his arm, try to get him back on some future episodes, and we'll start trying to work through as Joseph and I both get better on what's the next stage. Once we start finally getting down, all right, I'm aiming both all the time. All right, I'm starting to learn. All right, this is where I need improvement on my moving patterns. More drills and stuff we can come up with. We'll start working through those with Blake. And so stay tuned for our future episodes on that. Anything last minute you want to throw in there, Blake?
I was just going to ask, would you aim both shots in bench rest?
Oh, yes.
Okay, enough said.
That's one of my rules. I say I never.
Well, you can't shoot fast in bench rest.
No, you can't.
But you can.
But you still aim both.
What we call fish.
Oh yeah.
I think the wind's going to blow it there. I always say never. It's like a lawyer in court. A lawyer in court never asks a question he don't already know the answer to.
Yep.
Don't ever pull a trigger unless you already know where that shot's going.
Yeah.
And so
Works that way in pistol.
Yeah, exactly. Works the same way there.
That's it, man.
All right. Well, good thing. We sure appreciate you coming out today.
Thank y'all for having me.
And that's going to be a wrap on this episode of Straight Shooting with Dan and Joseph. Tune in next time. It'll be about 2 weeks. We're going to be going over some more scores. We're going to have another shooting challenge. Not exactly sure what we're going to do yet. Send us in your requests or what you do or what you would like to see us do. Send us a video. We're going to go over barrels in the rimfire division, what a good barrel looks like, what makes a one barrel good and one barrel bad. We'll go over our knowledge on that, and then we'll finish up with bleeding off with Joseph, and he'll go over his training that he's doing currently and some of the matches. We'll find out how he did in Austin and if he's got any other matches coming up, and then as he gets ready to go to Florida for the Area 6 championships. Again, we thank you for tuning in. Be sure and follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and we will see you next time. Keep shooting straight.